Welcome to What? Series 12 and number 9. And I was reading the other day about giving to God and, the laws in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and all that kind of stuff, and where we get the idea of tithing from. Leviticus 27 verse 30 says, "A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from soil or fruit or from trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy and to the Lord. If a man redeems any of his tithe, he must add a fifth to the value to it, and the entire tithe of the herd and the flock. Every 10th animal passes under the shepherd's rod will be holy to the Lord." Wow, a tithe of everything, and if you don't do that, the value goes up. It's tough rules. Some say this was actually a tax of the country, so it doesn't apply. Sorry, the kings tax the people, and as well as making the people tithe. For the tithe was never supposed to be for the king, although some of them used it, but that's a different story. So what's this got to do with us? And I think what it says, and this is where it is hard, that some of my tithe gets to help some of other ministries. But what do I actually do with it? What I'm finding in the Bible is that gifts and offerings are two different things. We need to look at that perhaps another time. How does it fit in here? Well, I think there is a principle here. A tithe is just a tenth, but the best tenth, the first tenth. Your finances are yours to use after you have given to God, is the concept there. That is where the blessing bit comes in. After the tithe is given, you get blessed. And who doesn't want to get blessed? Malachi 3:10 says, basically, God says, test me, have a go at doing this. Maybe you should check that out as well. Now, what has this got to do with this next story? It's about a couple called Ananias and Sapphira. Well, heaps. They pretended to do the right thing. And in verse 2, it says, with his wife's full knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself, but he bought the rest and put it at the apostles' feet. And you see, they wanted to look good. They wanted people to take notice of what they did. That isn't a tithe or an offering. Where I lived out at Griffith, they had a word for it as a bribe. Except God doesn't fall for it. Neither does Peter and the other apostles. Now, I'm not saying that the deacons have this concept of financial discernment, but imagine if they did. We can't bribe God, but also if we shortchange him, we can't expect to get blessed. And that's an interesting concept. As individuals, or as an organisation like ours, or as a church, or as a denomination. We do the same thing in Ananias and Sapphira did, don't we? Let's be frank and honest. It's nice to have people notice what we do and to get recognition for being good little Christians. It is part of our ecosystems. It's not just about finance and money either. It's about our work at church and about our lifestyle. We like to be seen to be doing the right thing. Here is the amazing thing. Even if we justify it, God knows our real heart, doesn't he? Look at the next verses. In Acts chapter 5 and verse 3, it says, "Then Peter said, 'Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? What made you think you could do such a thing? You have not lied to men, but to God.'" Somehow, God made Peter aware of the deception. Notice that there was no issue or expectation from Peter for them to give it all. The issue is not the money, but the dishonesty. When I was a kid, I used to get pocket money. One day I put money in the plate and tried to rummage around for change. I got $1, so I wanted 90 cents changed, and Mum thumped me. I got into trouble. After the service, I went to the church treasurer and I asked for my change, and he said, "No way, it's in the plate now, there's no change." So for the next 9 weeks, I let the pate come past and put my hand over the top and clonk the bottom of it with my thumb to make the sound as if I put money in. Not long after that, the church went to having a bag instead of the plates. My justification was the treasurer ripped me off. I'm not sure who was dishonest, me or the treasurer. No, I actually know it was me. The real issue is in the attitude, and Ananias and Sapphira ripped God off. Wrong dealings with God has a consequence. Does God still work this way today? Yeah, well, maybe not. Certainly not all the time, because there have been times when I have not put the money in the bag, so to speak, and I think God works with us individually and communicates to us as we need to be communicated to. With Ananias and Sapphira, he dealt with them in a very individual way. They had to take the consequences of their actions before God. It's not only the money issues that this applies to. It is all of our life. We need to deal with God rightly. Otherwise, he will have to teach us how to deal rightly with him. Look at the Old Testament. It's one story after the other of how God teaches his people to relate to him properly in all areas of life. That's because we relate to God, and our relationship with him is a full life thing. And it's interesting, isn't it, that God is interested in all of our life. Remember what it said about tithes in Leviticus. It's a tithe of everything, a tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or from fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord, is holy to the Lord. The consequences of Ananias and Sapphira it was instant death. It was a very sudden consequence. But even death has an impact. Notice in verses 5 and 6, when Ananias heard this, he fell down and died, and great fear seized all who had seen it happen. Wouldn't you be a bit fazed by it? Wouldn't you also be a bit fearful? How would you relate to Peter over the next couple of days? Would you watch what he said to him? Imagine if he said, how are you? Would you say, great, Pete, when you actually didn't sleep all that well? Or your nose is a bit runny? Or would you actually spell it out? Oh, I didn't sleep well, mate, and my nose is a bit runny, I'm not feeling on top of it. You'd be careful not to lie, wouldn't you? In case you drop dead. Shouldn't we always be a little bit like that? Shouldn't we always be thinking our sin and our lies have consequences? Yes. But we think God will ignore the little ones, don't we? What could be worse? Well, I think agreeing to sin, helping someone else to sin. Both members of this couple agreed to lie. Each had a chance to say it wasn't a good idea. Each had a chance to keep each other on the straight and narrow. But they didn't. They helped each other to be dishonest. It shouldn't happen, but it does. Probably still happens. We as husbands and wives need to spur each other on to godliness and holiness, not to dishonesty. Yeah. Now, what is the point of all this? To get our offerings up? Well, no. They probably aren't great, when we don't even ask for money. But that isn't my thinking. In fact, this sermon is just the next chapter in the book of Acts. It just came up. I didn't choose to talk about money and such. My thinking is if God has worked it this way because I didn't manipulate it this way, if God has worked it in this way, then he wants us to have a look at some of these issues. Yep, absolutely. Me and you. The challenge must be, are we fair dinkum with our relationship to God? We need to be thinking about that. Does our relationship to God extend to our money matters? We need to be thinking about that. Are we willing to test God? As Malachi states. Go back and have a look at that. These are things that we need to think on this week. Bless you.